Hey guys, welcome to the Vendas B2B Summit. Today we have a very special guest who was one of the speakers from the last year edition. His name is Mark Roberge. Mark is a senior lecturer at Harvard Business School. He's a former CRO at HubSpot, author of the bestseller book, The Sales Acceleration Formula. And he's also in the board of director, board of advisor, and investor of 20 companies as HubSpot, Catalan, VDS, Drift, and many others. Mark, thank you very much and welcome to the summit.
You bet, Daniel. Glad to be back.
Thanks. Well, by now, in our audience, everybody knows you, but I'm curious to know a little bit more about what you've been doing after leaving HubSpot.
Yeah, sure. So as you know, I joined Harvard Business School's faculty full-time. It's kind of an opportunity that fell in my lap that I was just so humbled and honored to be offered. And it seemed to like really fit with my life because as a technologist myself, as a former coder, I had the naive impression going into the entrepreneur ecosystem in my early 20s that the best product will always win. And as I ventured through my entrepreneur career, that didn't really prove out. And I think you've heard a lot of even product-oriented people admit that sometimes an exceptional go-to-market strategy and sales strategy can actually be more valuable than having the best product. And a lot of times you'll see someone with the best product not always have success. And so what intrigued me about it was we don't really teach selling in school. And when I wrote the sales acceleration formula and various faculty members at HBS took interest and had interest in joining me, having me join the faculty to try to evangelize these concepts in the academic circles, that just seemed like, the right next thing to do. And HBS in particular has been a really amazing platform to do that because not only do they attract extraordinary students and extraordinary faculty to collaborate with, but many other business schools look to them for case examples and curriculum development. So I feel like I have an opportunity not just to develop great academic sales curriculum at HBS, but also try to inspire the rest of the academic community on how to bring this into their own curriculum.
Great. I went to business school and I didn't have any class about sales. So it's really something important that you're doing.
Nice.
Mark, I know you've been advising a lot of startups recently, and I read that you have a framework for advising startups. And we do have a lot of them in our audience. So could you explain it to us?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really passionate about these days. And as I continue to see like 100+ data points every year through my new kind of career journey here, I'm really starting to codify this and who knows, maybe it'll turn into a new book, but trying to write content around it. But it's a pretty simple framework, which is customer success, then unit economics, and then growth and moat. And so what I mean by that is thanks to the great work of Steve Blank and Eric Ries, I feel like the entrepreneur ecosystem has moved away from the 18-month product development cycle in a vacuum and then launch it and see if it sticks. We've gotten really good at agile development. We've embraced product market fit. We've embraced MVPs, but we haven't really adapted that to the go-to-market strategy, in my opinion. And I feel like many definitions of product market fit are too oriented around making a sale and not oriented enough around delivering customer value and success. And so that's really where the part of the basis of the framework is. Step number one is not about revenue growth. It's not about profitability. It's not about nailing your pricing model. It's not about figuring out your ideal distribution strategy. Step number one of a startup, once you've gotten through the product MVP development, is can you put 5, 10, 50 customers in your offering on your product, and 3 months later, 6 months later, have 90% of them being like, it did what you said. Like everything you pitched me in terms of value, I got it. And don't ever take this away from me. And so that's the first step that needs to be achieved. And it's very hard to achieve that. But when you get distracted by these other things like profitability and all this other stuff, you limit your ability to achieve that. Oftentimes companies will band-aid a lack of customer success with revenue growth. I would argue Groupon and Zenefits are modern day examples of folks that took it to a very big company, but never really delivered on customer value and customer success. And so it's important to instrument that first. Then once you have that, once you have instrumented that you're predictably bringing on customers. And again, in that phase, I don't really care if it costs you $20,000 to bring on a customer that's worth $10,000. You know, just as long as you make them successful, throw the kitchen sink at them to do it. Now, those who raise venture capital, you can pull that.
Don't worry about scalability at this point.
Don't worry about scalability. Don't worry about optimizing your price. Price it for commitment. Don't worry about a compensation plan. You hire a very different type of salesperson at this stage. It's a more of an innovator, product manager type. Don't work with partners because they're going to put a bridge between you and the customer, and you're going to lose that learning loop, right? So there's a whole framework or methodology to running this. And if you've raised venture capital, you can afford to run at a loss. If you haven't, you just have to work through blood, sweat, and tears. You know, that 80 to 100-hour work week. That's where your lack of profitability comes in. And then once you nail that, then let's move to unit economics, right? So now you've proven that you can bring people on successfully. Now let's figure out a scalable business model before we scale, right? So in SaaS, we talk about LTV to CAC ratios and payback. In more, legacy models, you might talk about like gross margin, operating margin, that kind of stuff. But you've got to figure out a way that if what you have going on, if you 100x'd that, will you have a successful model? And that's where we have to start thinking about pricing model and compensation plans and lowering CAC in our distribution model and what our marketing model will be and what type of salesperson we'll hire and all that kind of stuff. Once you've nailed that.
Mark, people love benchmarks. So do you think the LTV to CAC ratio of 3 it's a good benchmark to look for?
Yeah, that's what you see a lot is 3 to 1, payback period, 12 months or less. And there's a magic number concept, which I think Bessemer was the first to come up with, that you look for like 0.8 or above. You can Google those terms and study them. They're a bit quantitative, but you can check those out. And so once you nail that second step of customer success, now you're ready to scale. Right? And you've got to make sure you keep an eye on customer success and unit economics as you scale, because you're going to be adding a salesperson a month, 2 salespeople a month, whatever, is doubling your marketing spend every 6 months. And it's very easy for the wheels to come off, and you want to know very early if that's going to happen or not. All right. So now as you scale, I throw in growth and moat, because I see a lot of examples of people who hit the first 2 and then scale, but they never think about barrier to entry, and they never think about protecting themselves from copycats. And as you scale, it's very important to make strategic decisions and have a vision on how you're going to create a barrier to entry, because you are hopefully going to be a hot space and a hot company, and people are going to copycat you. They are going to reverse engineer what you're doing. They are going to undercut you on price. Your space may become commoditized unless you think about this moat development along the way. So that's a framework, and I'm happy to talk more about that, but that's a lot of the work I've been digging into these days.
Great. Could you give an example of a barrier that you can create during this growth? Yeah.
So like grabbing data would be a good example. If you had a freemium offering, or you started, as you grew, you started to gather information about your customer base that you can then move back into the product to create value, whether it's in like benchmarking or best practice assessments. If you were the first one to capture 100, 500, 1,000 customers, and then leverage the aggregate insights from those mechanisms into your product, it's very hard for a copycat to come in and be like, yeah, we have the same exact product. No, you don't. You don't have the history, right? Sometimes like network effects can come into play. One of the companies you saw listed is VTS down in New York. They're a company that is basically creating a platform for all commercial real estate property owners and brokers to communicate. And so like, that's kind of something where 10 years from now, there's probably not going to be 2 of those. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to have a broker log into two different systems. One of them is going to win. And if VTS can demonstrate that they have the biggest traction, have the biggest customers signed up, they've raised the most money from the most important people, that's hard for someone to come in and copy and win. For HubSpot, it was inbound marketing. You know, creating a meme, the whole play bigger, blue ocean is a great way to do it. It's like we came out, the company came out and evangelized inbound marketing, created a new word, and it took off. And 5 years later, tons of people tried to come in and say, hey, we have an inbound marketing software platform too. It just helped us because we had the whole first page of Google, we had the LinkedIn group, we had the conference, we had the book. When you did inbound marketing, you did it with HubSpot, right? So that's another popular way to do it.
Great examples. Thanks. Yeah. Mark, you wrote an article in 2016 from HBR called "A Recession Doesn't Mean Your Startup Can't Grow." In that time, the U.S. economy wasn't stable, and you said a down economy is the best time to build a sales team. Brazil is going through a tough time right now. Could you tell us what you meant back then?
Yeah, because we went through it with HubSpot. I mean, when I wrote the article, we didn't know where the economy was going to go. It actually flipped back. It was great, which is great, but it made the article less relevant. But it was awesome. You know, we lived through it in 2008 at HubSpot. It was our first year being in business, and it was a very bad economic time in the U.S. And I'd heard in my own business school studies that amazing companies like Intel and Apple and others were built in down economies, and it was actually there was a theory on that was an advantage. And I certainly lived that as an operator, because when the economy is down, number one, you don't get away with a nice to have value prop. Everyone's budgets are cut. And you're only going to survive if you are solving a critical problem with a must-have solution. And that was huge for HubSpot. I mean, everyone cut their budgets and they were like, let's get sales going. And we just happened to have a value prop that was a must-have at that point. That's number one. Number two, the competition for talent is just much easier. I mean, in a rocking economy right now, I mean, there are so many startups that are funded. There are so many people who are getting funded. And then big companies are overpaying for people because it's really hard to find talent. But in a down economy, there's layoffs. Startups aren't getting funded. VCs can't raise money. They're not putting money to work. There's all these hiring freezes. There's a lot of talent out there. And then furthermore, the talent you have, it's easy to retain and motivate. You know, in a really good economy, people get a little spoiled. They're getting calls every week from recruiters, like more money. Well, you know, and they might be distracted and like have a high, you know, they're in a down economy, they're psyched to have a job. They're psyched to be working at a hot company, and they're going to go above and beyond to perform, right? So there's just a lot of advantages that we were able to use. I think we benefited greatly. And, you know, I know it's tough in Brazil now, but maybe that's the upside to the situation is this is a great time to build a company, arguably.
Yeah, we're happy to take advantage of it. And Mark, another topic that is, there's a lot of people discussing here in Brazil right now is about specialization of sales teams. When should we have or not a BDR or SDR function? And I've seen you talking about organizing a structure around a buyer persona rather than go-to-market function. So what's your perspective on specialization, and when and who should do it?
Yeah, it's always a very challenging question. You can specialize along a couple different dimensions. The popular ones are the buyer type, like by industry, tech, financial services, healthcare. You could do it by the buyer size, enterprises versus small business. You can do it by the stage of the sales process, like having BDRs versus account executives versus customer success people. And you can actually do it by lead source. You can have an inbound team, you can have a cold calling team, you could have a channel team, right? So it gets really confusing when you start considering all of those. I personally, in the beginning, I mean, this gets back to the, you know, customer success, unit economics growth. This is more of a unit economics issue. In customer success, you don't want to you need to have someone who's kind of full cycle. I'd even be hesitant to start with BDRs because it's very difficult to take them away. But then as you start to scale like a full cycle individual, you can start to experiment with different specialization techniques. It's very hard for me to answer that question generically because it really depends. I would just encourage you to not copy someone else's, like a friend's model right off the bat for yours, because it is so contextual. I'd encourage you to start full cycle and then start adding people and as experiments to see if it makes it better. Especially true for BDRs, right? Like once you introduce BDRs, there's no going back. It's very difficult to go back because you've essentially spoiled the reps. And so what I do is probably scale to 3 or 4 people, salespeople. They're going to complain all the time about having BDRs. They want BDRs, believe me. You'll have all these PowerPoints on why they need BDRs. And when it's time, if you think it's right for you, introduce a BDR with 2 of your best reps and see if they can perform a level ahead that makes it worthwhile for the company. Because by the way, you're already starting with some negatives in the sense that adds some complexity to the business, and it adds friction between your customer and your best people. Right now you're having your prospect talk to usually a 22 or 23-year-old junior seller, as opposed to your best salesperson. So right off the bat, you've got a couple negatives. But that said, they're commonly used. I used them as well. It's just go carefully in that journey.
Great. Mark, you created a framework in HubSpot called GPCT. Before that, IBM created Vendas, Rackham created Spin, and there's many others around. We have a lot of Brazilian companies adopting GPCT right now, and we're always discussing when to use one framework or another. Some say that if you're doing an enterprise sale, budget is critical. BANT could be a good option because you qualify budget from the beginning. If you're solving a problem, a pain, or something that people are feeling every day, SPIN could be a good option because you go and implicate the problem and make it feel bigger, the problem. And that GPCT would be a great option for selling a future benefit, like generating more leads, more sales, growth. What do you think about that? Is that a contextual choice? They somehow complement each other, or GPCT works? Do you think GPCT works in any context?
Yeah, I'm really glad you're asking this question. I probably haven't talked about it enough. So I do think the choice is contextual, and I also think that these should be starting points for you, and you should look hard at your buyer journey and sales process and feel that you can customize it by adding another dimension or 2 that's important to your context. Don't make it 10 pieces. Don't make it like, Mississippi. You know what I mean? It's just going to be too confusing. But, try to have 4 to 6 and you can customize it to you. The GPCT story is, I don't think you're choosing between GPCT and BANT. Pete Caputa actually appended to GPCT. He said GPCT BA. And the reason why I created GPCT was we started with BANT, and we found that the most important elements of the discovery process was the need and the timing. And mentally, because they came at the end of BANT, salespeople put them at the end in terms of like when to, they'd start off like, so do you have budget? And are you a decision maker? Because that's the order. And so instead of just we tried to train them on like the importance here, and there was all these like double clicks into MT. And I just said, okay, let's do GPCT, goal, plan, challenge, timeline. And that forced the salesperson to like mentally start with the goal. And sophisticated reps ran a really nice consultative process. But even the like average ones, at least they could say, what's your goal? What's your plan to achieve it? What challenges do you face? What's your timeline to achieve the goal? They could follow that thing and it made sense. And so where GPCT falls short is you still have to qualify them on budget and authority. So you can put the B and the A at the end. Okay, so that's what I think about is start with GPCT BA and then feel free to customize it, remove some pieces, add others, depending on your context. Now, the other point that I'd make is GPCT BA, I think, is very good for transactional sales up to like mid-market sales. We're talking about 1 week to 2 or 3 month sales cycles. When you get into very large enterprise selling, where you're talking about year sales cycle, $1 million deals, lots of different, a complicated decision-making unit, I would use MEDDIC. Okay, that's MEDDIC. You can Google it. A great mentor of mine, John McMahon at PTC, is supposedly the inventor of that. I'd give him credit. That's a really good one for big deals. Okay, so that's what I think about. Big deals, use MEDDIC. Other than that, use GPCTBA and feel free to customize it.
Great. Mark, thank you very much. It was always a pleasure to talk to you and have you here in our event. Where people can find more about you?
Yeah, sure. LinkedIn and Twitter is where I'm publishing most, probably on LinkedIn. So you can just follow me there. I'm always around chatting things up. So,
Mark, thank you very much.
Thanks, Daniel. Good luck.
Bye-bye.